Hi there, and welcome to the Surviving and Thriving in Residency podcast. I'm Charley Lowry, your host and director of GME Relations at PracticeLink. This show is all about exploring the world of graduate and undergraduate medical education. We'll dive into the real-life experiences, successes, and challenges faced by medical students, residents, and fellows, while also highlighting valuable tools to support you, whether that's financial planning, student aid, or the many free resources provided by PracticeLink. If you're thinking about med school, currently studying, or deep into residency or fellowship, this podcast is here to offer insights and support to make your journey a bit easier than those before you. Today, I'm happy to have with us Sallie Stephens, who is a manager, Healthcare Stakeholder Engagement Midwest region for the National MS Society. Good morning, Sallie. How are you doing?
Good morning, Charley. I am doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast. So we met, I think, at an AHEC national gathering in Lexington, Kentucky. And I thought it would be great to have you on the show and talk a little bit about the MS Society and what it can offer to residents. But let's start by talking a little bit about you. Just tell me a little bit about your background and what brought you to the MS Society and where you are today.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad that we got to meet at the AHEC conference. Yeah, so my name is Sallie Stephens. I live with MS, and I've had MS for about 13 years. That is, I kind of serendipitously ended up at the National MS Society, but I do have a background in journalism, and then I also have a background in exercise physiology. So I got my master's degree in exercise physiology, and I taught lots of fitness classes, and I've worked at campus recreation, and I've worked at hospitals and physical therapy clinics. Loved my job. When I was diagnosed about 12 years ago with MS, or 13 years ago, I just was a little devastated by the diagnosis and started really thinking about what I wanted to do and how it was going to affect me. But I mean, I do pretty well with it, and I'm so thankful for that. But I found out through my MS neurologist that the National MS Society was hiring somebody in Ohio, which is where I live, to be a manager of Healthcare Stakeholder Engagement. So I was a little bit older, and I thought, what the heck, I'm just going to apply and see what happens. So I applied for the job, and I ended up getting it. And then I started thinking, oh gosh, is this something I really want to do? Because I've been in this other arena for so long, health and fitness and wellness and therapy, and do I really want to uproot and change? And then I thought, you know what? If you don't go for it, you'll just never know. So I accepted the job, and as I said, I live in Ohio, and I covered all of the state of Ohio. I work with all the healthcare providers that see people that live with MS. So that includes neurologists, advanced practice providers, nurses, therapists, physical therapists, speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, social workers, anybody that actually works with somebody living with MS. And then, as you know, the pandemic came along and we went virtual, and I think it's been a good thing, the virtual, because I certainly didn't do that very much before that. With the pandemic, I gained some more states. I gained Indiana and Michigan, and well, here we are, fast forward to 2025, and I cover the entire Midwest region. So I work with 12 states and in the Midwest, and work with all those providers, and it's a really exciting and interesting and job that just keeps me moving all the time, and I love it.
That's incredible. It really is incredible. So I'm going to ask you, what are the symptoms of MS, but more specifically for you, what led you to your diagnosis? What were your key symptoms yourself, and what are the overall symptoms?
That's a great question. And I have to say that we call MS the snowflake disease because everybody presents differently, and no two people have the same symptoms. So if you meet somebody with MS, you meet somebody with MS, and you just never know. But for me personally, I've always been really active. As I said, I was taught fitness classes, and I was an exercise physiologist. I was a runner, and I started falling when I was running. And I live out in the country, and I'd fall on these gravel roads, and it was very disconcerting to me. And I started having some numbness and tingling in my hands and my feet. And I thought, there's something wrong. I don't know what it is. So I went to just my primary care physician and was referred to a neurologist. And it took several years for me actually to be diagnosed with MS or multiple sclerosis, as you want to call it. And I still, after all these years, still struggle to say multiple sclerosis. Sometimes that's a hard one to get out. So my
That's
primary,
one, yeah.
It is, yeah. So my primary symptoms were really numbness, tingling, intolerance to heat. Summertime, even though I love it, it's not my favorite season just because I have to pretty much stay inside all the time because heat it just exacerbates all my symptoms, just makes me feel very weak and tired. Extreme fatigue is another pretty common symptom for people living with MS. But you'll find anything for people living with MS: double vision, dizziness. I do have dizziness myself, some cognitive impairment. I say I have cognitive impairment. I don't know if it's because of my age or because of my MS. So we'll go with both. How about that? It could be pain. It could be pain behind the eyes, which is called optic neuritis. There's just a lot of different symptoms, but the typical ones are fatigue, numbness and tingling, some problems walking, some cognitive impairment, and then the heat intolerance is what you would see most often with MS.
I see.
And the thing about multiple sclerosis is that it's hard to diagnose because really diagnosing MS is more a ruling out of other diseases first or other conditions. So it mimics so many other different types of diseases like Lyme disease. There's just a lot of different things that it mimics. So you have to rule all those other things out first before you can actually have that official diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. So basically, it's a disorder where your immune system, your body is attacking your immune system. And you've heard of autoimmune disorders. So it's an autoimmune disorder of the central nervous system. So what's happening is your body is attacking the nerve fibers of your brain, your optic nerve behind your eye, and then your spinal cord. So what happens then is it attacks what's called the myelin sheath. And the myelin sheath, you can kind of compare that to an electrical cord. You know how you've got an electrical cord and it's got a coating on the outside of the electrical cord, and if you were to cut that open, you'd see all these little skinny wires. So if you think of the myelin sheath, that is covering all of those little nerve fibers. The myelin sheath is that fatty coating or that plastic or rubber coating over an electrical cord. And the nerve fibers are broken down when your autoimmune system is attacking it. It breaks and severs those nerve fibers. And what that does is it slows the connection between the brain and the spinal cord and the rest of the body. So it can either break or slow down that communication so that you can't, like you tell your arm to move and it doesn't move, or your brain is telling your foot to move and it doesn't move the way it's supposed to. That is a very basic description of what MS is, but it has to do with the brain, the optic nerve, the spinal cord, and it's a disruption of the communication between the brain and the rest of the body and the spinal cord. So that when that is broken down in the myelin sheath, when the nerve fibers are broken down, that's called demyelination. And the body has a way of rebuilding that myelin, but it's not always perfect. And so with MS, that demyelination happens, but it's really hard for the body to rebuild that myelin. And once that nerve fiber and that connection has been severed, it's gone. You can't fix that. So multiple sclerosis, there's no cure for MS right now, But what we want to do is really try to get people diagnosed as quickly as possible so that they can get on disease-modifying therapies. There's over 20 of them, and that slows the progression of the disease, and that's what we want. It may not stop the symptoms, but it will slow the progression of the disease, and that's our goal.
Yeah. So tell me, how long did it take you to get diagnosed? Did it take a long time?
It took me a long time, and it's not always that way for everybody.
Yeah, and I guess I asked because, I think with healthcare, especially when it is something like MS, where it can mimic so many other things, I know that it can get very frustrating when you feel bad and you don't know what's causing it, and it takes forever to diagnose. I feel like sometimes, it's a curse getting the diagnosis, but it's also a blessing at the same time. It's like two different feelings. You're so glad to have the diagnosis and know what's going on, but then, there's the downside of knowing that you do have something that is lifelong. So that's why I asked how long it took to get diagnosed. I feel like maybe this could be one of those things where for the average patient, it might take a little while to get diagnosed because of the symptoms and the variation of symptoms from person to person.
I think it really just depends on where you end up going, what doctors you tend to see. When I was diagnosed, I don't think there was as much information about MS. I went to my primary care physician, which a lot of people, that's your natural instinct, is to go to your primary care. And I ended up, it probably took me a good 3 years to be diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. In retrospect, when I look back, I had symptoms for years and didn't really realize it. I was diagnosed after my son was born, which for a lot of women tend to get MS more than men. For a lot of women, a hormonal episode like pregnancy can tend to trigger that. So my son is 28 years old now, so I was having symptoms for 28 years, even though I really was not diagnosed until like about 12 or 13 years ago. So it can be frustrating. It can be very frustrating. But there's also people that get diagnosed right away. So it just depends on who you go to. And that's why I love to get the word out about MS, because the key is really to be diagnosed as quickly as possible so that we can get people on those disease-modifying therapies.
At PracticeLink, we know the road to your first practice can be challenging. That's why we created the First Practice Fund. PracticeLink's First Practice Fund is our biannual scholarship program supporting future healthcare leaders in 6 key categories, from medical students to rural medicine providers. Applications for the next round open soon. Tell us your story and we'll help you take the next step. Visit PracticeLink.com for more information.
So who does get MS? You were talking about women get it more than men. What other stats do you have there on who gets MS?
Lots of stats. So there's over 1 million people in the United States that live with MS. Women tend to get it more than men, about 3 times more than men. I also like to say, though, that it is a non-discriminatory disease. Anybody can get it. It doesn't matter what your race is, your ethnicity. It could affect anybody. But we tend to see people that live north of the equator do get diagnosed with MS more so than south of the equator, and that has to do with vitamin D levels. As you know, if you live north of the equator, you don't get as much sun, and our body uses the sun to produce vitamin D. So most people that are diagnosed with MS do have low levels of vitamin D. That's one thing. Most people are diagnosed between the ages of 20 and 40, although there are children as young as 1 year old that are diagnosed with MS, and of course older than the 20 to 40. There are other contributing factors. If you are overweight, you have a greater chance of being diagnosed with MS. If you are already diagnosed with MS and you are overweight, you have a greater chance of showing more symptoms and having the disease progress faster. Smoking has a lot to do with MS as well. If you are a smoker, you have a greater chance of getting MS. Same thing with as an overweight. If you have MS and you smoke, your symptoms are going to be worse. There's also some diseases out there too that tend to be a contributing factor. The Epstein-Barr virus, which causes mononucleosis. Our researchers are discovering there is a huge connection between the Epstein-Barr virus and multiple sclerosis. Ironically, I had the Epstein-Barr virus when I was in high school. So when I found out that connection, it was like, oh, light bulb moment for me to know that I'm kind of following that pattern. But they really don't know why people get MS. There's still no definitive cause, and that's what we're working on. Absolutely.
Okay. And then let's talk about treatment. So what are the treatments?
That's a great question. We have over 20 what we call disease-modifying therapies, or DMTs, that are available right now that are approved by the FDA.
Okay.
And those can be anything from a pill to an injection to an infusion. Sometimes when you're diagnosed, it's going to take a couple of different types of DMTs to find out what's the best one for you. Some people prefer to take a pill. Some people prefer to get an infusion every 6 months. I prefer myself to actually take a pill twice a day. But for some people, that's difficult. And if you have cognitive issues and you forget, that would be a bad thing. So I love that there's so many different options available. I will say that even since I've been diagnosed, there's been so many more medications that have been approved and continue to be approved. They're very expensive, which is extremely frustrating. And that's not uncommon for any type of chronic illness, that your medications are very expensive. So that's something that on a side note, that's something that I'm really interested in. I love to do advocacy work and work with our legislators on the state and national level to try to get those medication prices down.
Yeah. Well, something personal for me. So my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, was diagnosed with MS maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. So, I've been through the struggle with her, and the medication cost was a big factor. The newer medications that are out now I see them advertised a lot on television, even the newer medications, but just so incredibly expensive. And so that was a stressor for her, having to deal with, how are we going to cover the cost of this and all of that. So,
when you say that too, stress is a huge contributing factor to making your symptoms worse. Just even everyday life, it's just stress is hard on people. But if you have a chronic illness like MS, it definitely can make it worse. So knowing, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to pay $60,000 a year for my medication, that's a huge stressor, which then can cause no sleep, which is another thing that makes your symptoms much worse. So it can be a vicious circle, unfortunately. Thankfully, though, I will say that there are pharma companies out there that do offer assistance programs, and I'm so grateful for that, because that is a huge help for people.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So how about lifestyle interventions and preventative health measures? Let's talk about those.
Sure. Well, I love that. And coming from a fitness and wellness background, that's something that I'm very passionate about myself. But as far as lifestyle factors, don't smoke. Try to live as healthy of a life as you possibly can. Try to keep your weight down. Be active. That's so important. I know that when you're first diagnosed with any type of chronic illness, sometimes your first response is to just kind of curl up in a ball and feel sorry for yourself. And I certainly went through that myself too, but I've discovered that when I'm more active, I do so much better. I walk, I do as much as I possibly can. There'll be good days and bad days, but I really try to be as active as possible. And mental health is so important too, as it is for anybody. But I would say that when you're living with a chronic illness, it's so important to really work on your mental health and to surround yourself with people that make you feel good and that lift you up and help advocate for you. And if you need to see somebody, there's no shame in talking to somebody or even taking medication if that's something that you need for your mental health. So that's super, super important. Diet's important too. I know that there's lots of different diets that are out there that say, they help this or that. And I kind of go more toward just try to eat as healthy as you possibly can within reason. I certainly went through a phase where I did some of the different very extreme diets that are out there called MS diets, and they were really difficult, and I don't think the payoff was worth the amount of work I put into those different diets. So I just try to eat as healthy as I can. Everything within moderation, I would say.
I think that's great. And I think another little tip might be it's okay to reach out to folks who have been diagnosed with MS. I think sometimes you can find a good support network there, and you might feel very alone in your struggle, but there are a lot of folks out there. You said how many people nationwide right now have MS?
Over 1 million.
Over 1 million.
Over 1 million. And you're so right about the support groups. We call them self-help groups or support groups through the society. We offer lots of different types of self-help groups for people living with MS, men, teenagers, over 50, lots of different ones. And, I mentioned the pandemic earlier, but I would say that the pandemic really helped our self-help groups because previously they were always in person and sometimes you just can't get out. If your MS has progressed to the point where it's difficult for you to get around, it's hard to go to a self-help group. So now most of our self-help groups are virtual or hybrid, so you can have the option of either going in person or doing it virtually. So that's been a huge help for people.
Hello, my name is Sarah Eichinger. When I applied for First Practice Fund Scholarship, I never imagined how much it would impact my journey as a physician. The $2,500 award helped me focus on what truly matters, which is caring for patients and serving my community. If you're a current medical student, resident, or advanced practice provider with a passion for making a difference, this is the opportunity for you. Applications for the second round of First Practice Fund scholarships are opening soon. Visit PracticeLink.com today to learn more.
Let's talk a little bit about services. What does the society offer to people living with MS and their families and caregivers?
Thank you for asking that. We have a great website through the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. It's www.nationalmssociety.org. And on that website, we have so many different services and information that we provide. Anything from people who are newly diagnosed, there's information there on what MS is. If you go to the website, it's broken down to very easily understandable, lots of videos on there. We have a service called the Navigator Program, and those are trained therapists and social workers who strictly talk to people living with MS all day long, either through a phone call or via email. They are a wonderful support. They can help navigate you through your journey, whether you're just newly diagnosed to you're needing information on durable medical equipment or somebody out there that offers mental health services. The nice thing about the navigators is they're all over the country. When you talk to a navigator, you may be talking to somebody in Colorado, but they all have the same database and information, and they can pinpoint exactly in your state good resources for you. So I highly recommend that. And I also highly recommend to our providers to refer their patients to the navigators. As far as providers and professionals go, we have a whole section for people that work in the field of multiple sclerosis. We've got a database of information. We have all kinds of handouts that you can give to your patients. We've got information on all of the disease-modifying therapies. We have appeal letters for social workers or for providers that if your patient's disease-modifying therapy was denied by insurance, we've got template letters that you can use to help you fight the fight for those medications.
That's a huge help.
It is. Oh, yeah. And I hear all the time from our providers how helpful it is. And we have them for every disease-modifying therapy out there right now. We also offer resources for physicians and any kind of healthcare provider. We've got continuing education credit types of webinars that they can attend. I personally, working with healthcare providers, I have a newsletter that I send out every month specifically geared toward healthcare providers about upcoming opportunities for them to earn their continuing education credits, new information about any types of medications that are coming out. We have something called the diagnostic criteria that is actually going to be changing in the next month or so. And so we will be all afire about talking about all of that information and getting that information out to our healthcare providers so that they have that information right as soon as it comes out as they work with their patients. All kinds of information, self-help groups. We offer programs through the society, in-person or virtual programs. We have something called the Black MS Experience Summit, which is for people who live with MS who are people of color. We also have a Hispanic Latinx Summit that we put on a couple times a year. We offer Ask an MS Expert with doctors. We have that in English and in Spanish. I could go on and on, Charlie.
That is, it's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. It's incredible.
Thank you.
How about opportunities at the Society for Research Fellowships, anything like that, medical student mentorship program? I know we talked a little bit about that in Kentucky a month or so ago. So if you could talk about that for me, that would be great.
I'm happy to talk about that, and thank you so much for asking. Yes, one of the goals of the National MS Society is to fund research and to get our neurologists even more trained in MS. So we offer lots of fellowships. We offer research grants. We offer institutional grants for those academic programs that want to have a fellow there. We offer several different types of fellowships, research fellowships, postdoctoral fellowships, and that's all on our website. As a matter of fact, those fellowships, the application process is open right now. So if that's something that someone who's listening to is interested in, please go to the website and just look under fellowships and grants, and you'll see all the different types that are available right now. Again, research is so important to us because that's how we get our DMTs and how we find out how to cure this disease. I would be very happy if I didn't have a job anymore because there was a cure to MS. And you mentioned also our medical student mentorship program. That's something that we offer every year. It's a 4-week program for first and second year medical students. We have 30 different locations throughout the United States. These are wonderful MS specialists who are devoting their time to work with these first or second year med students. It's a paid mentorship, which is fabulous. And they get to spend every day for 4 weeks with these MS specialists and just learn everything they can about MS and how these doctors are treating it. And not only just the neurologist, but also the whole team. So I always like to say it takes a village to treat MS. So working with those advanced practice providers, working with the social workers, working with the rehab specialists, and seeing how it does take a village to treat MS. We just finished that up during the month of June, and we have all of our students write a reflection paper, and I love to read those reflection papers and send them on to the mentors so they can see what a difference they made in the student's life and what they've learned. It's a great program, the medical student mentorship, as well as our fellowships and all of our grants and research opportunities that we have through the National MS Society.
So the student mentorship program, you said that's usually held in June. Is that right?
Yes. And I believe that the applications, they will start probably around November. We'll take applications for the following year. So if a student is interested, they can certainly reach out to me, but all that information will also be on our website.
That's great to know. I work with a lot of medical students, and I'm sure they would be highly interested in this. That's really great. So what else? What else do you want to share today before we wrap up? Is there a message you want to get out there?
Let me tell you just a little bit how the National MS Society was founded, because I think it's kind of a cool story. There's a woman by the name of Sallie Lowry, who's no longer with us, but in the 1940s, she was headed toward law school. She lived in New York City. Her brother, Bernard was his name, was diagnosed with MS when he was 21 years old. And she was so frustrated with the fact that there were no medications, there was no information out there about MS. And so she put a little tiny ad in the New York Times that said something along the lines of, "Multiple sclerosis, if you've been cured, reach out to me." And she got over 50 responses. Of course, nobody had been cured. And that just fueled the fire for her. And she had no medical background whatsoever, but she gathered together all of these researchers, and she founded an organization that wasn't called the National MS Society at the time, but she gathered together all these researchers, and she got a grant for $54,000, which, as you know, in the 40s, that was a lot of money. And it's a lot of money now, actually, I think. And she founded the National MS Society, and that started in 1947. And she just was a walking force, and she continued to work for the society, I think, until like 1982. Served on the board until she passed away. I think that was in 2001. We have Sallie Lowry fellowships that we offer that are named in honor of her. And I just think she is an inspiration for me. And I think the thing that she said was never give up hope. And that's something that I truly believe in. I never give up hope for all of us living with MS and the caregivers as well.
Great. That's great. I'm going to have to do some research on Sallie Lowry. I wonder, of course, same last name. So, right?
True.
You never know.
You might be related.
Well, I truly appreciate you taking your time out of your day today. I know you have a lot to do, and we do appreciate you being on the podcast. On behalf of myself and PracticeLink, we would like to thank Sallie Stephens for being a guest. For our listeners, please reach out with any questions or feedback you have. You can email me. My email is on the PracticeLink website. You can also visit PracticeLink.com. My name is Charley Lowry, and we thank you very much for joining us today.